Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels. My guests tonight are the Eisner Award winning creators of the Black Panther Party, graphic novel history, David Walker and Marcus Anderson. And in about a week, they have a book coming out that I think is going to blow everybody's socks off, Big Jim and the White Boy. How's it going, guys?
Going
Going
good.
Doing well, yeah.
Um, it's,
well?
it's a crazy time, you know.
It
It,
is. It is.
The
that's an
I would
understatement.
the days leading up to any release is always odd or surreal.
Right,
This one's a little bit odder, a little bit surrealer.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I just made that word up.
That's
It,
an
it
okay word to make
works.
up. I mean, Shakespeare made up how many words? You can make up a few.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Um, so it's a retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Um, I'm just going to start with the easy and obvious question. Where where was the germ born? Where what was the seed? What made you decide that this was the story that you wanted to tell next?
There was it was actually a much longer process than a lot of people would realize. I for years I've been obsessed with Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and specifically with Jim. And so for a very long time I was threatening to write a novel about from Jim's perspective, right? And I even went so far as to start that novel probably 10, 12 years ago or something like that. Um, but I'm lazy and I have ADHD, and so a lot of ideas get started and then just sort of die on the vine. We weren't even done. Marcus and I weren't even done with the Black Panther Party when 10 Speed, our publisher, and specifically our editor, approached, and they said that they were thinking about doing some reimaginings of classic literature, and what do you think of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn? And I was like, what do I think of it? I actually have this book that I've started that never went anywhere. And so like that's sort of the short version of it. What's really interesting is a couple days ago I went through the original pitch for this book, and it's so different than how it turned out, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, initially, I think the idea that I originally had was this very over the top, even more over the top than what we've done. Sort of blaxploitation, like if they'd made a movie out of it in the 70s, Fred Williamson would have starred in it. There would have been a lot of like dead people, and yeah, I'm much happier with what we did than with what I initially envisioned.
Okay. How did it change?
Um, there's a lot of changes, but the one of the biggest ones was you think about an idea, you think about doing something, um, and then somebody says, "Yeah, okay, do it," and then you have to get real. Like, okay, how is
Mhm.
this going to sustain itself? And very early in the process, Marcus was still drawing um, the Black Panther Party actually, and I was like, he's the guy I want to draw this thing. And it was like, is his schedule going to permit? Will he want to do it? Will 10 Speed want him to do it? And you know, in my mind, it was always like, well, whatever artist partners up on this, I want to adjust accordingly. I want to make sure that I lean into their strengths of what they can do visually. And it was a really short list anyway, right? Like the Black Panther Party was such an amazing experience that it was like, I remember saying to our editor at 10 Speed, I was like, like Marcus is the guy to draw this, and um, so yeah, that was. I don't know if that answered any of your questions at this point, but once the deal was in place and once Marcus was on board, I realized that there was an opportunity to do something far bigger and I guess more relevant than what I had originally thought of, right? Like we all have these sort of ideas that will pop in our heads, like, What would it be like if Abbott and Costello, you know, went to the island of Dr. Moreau, which is an idea that I once had, right? Like
Right.
these, and some of these are things you'll never get to make or never get to do. But every now and then the opportunity presents itself to do it. And then again, you have to be like, okay, like now I have to actually make something good. I had a solid idea, but I want to make something good. And then at some point you go, no, I don't want to just make something good. I want to make something great. I want to make something important. I want to, and this is, some people might take this as being sort of ego driven, but you want to make a legacy book. You want to make a legacy project. You want to make something that when you're gone, people are still going to be talking about it.
I'm going to say quietly, just because I don't want Marcus to get embarrassed, you've succeeded. Um, whether it was your intent or not, you've succeeded. Um, Marcus, how did you feel when you got the pitch, when he started sending you scripts? What were your thoughts?
I mean, it was well. I mean, first of all, it was an immediate yes. It's interesting because I I guess my origin story with the original Mark Twain book is a little different, just in the sense that like I think I did read it in school at some point, but like it didn't stick with me, and it wasn't one of the and I was a kid who loved to read, and so there's certain books where I could tell you everything about how I felt when I read it, where I was when I was reading it, and I just don't I never really had that with the original book. But when I heard like, just the idea of David and I working on something else again, that was a yes there. But then just to hear the idea of like telling it from Jim's perspective and all the possibilities that could come with it, and I think if I remember those early conversations too, just the action and the violence and the all of the other things, because our story is far much more than that. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
like all of the things in the initial pitch was a no-brainer to me. It took a little while to land on like how we wanted it to look, because um our editor like knew that they wanted a look that was different than the Black Panther Party. So and it was funny because I was so deep in the visual language of the Black Panther Party at the time that it was kind of like hard to like jump out of that and be like really reinvent the style. So I mean, David, you correct me if I'm wrong on the timeline, but I think it was like after we revisited it, like after I turned in the Black Panther Party. And then I felt
Yeah,
like I had my brain space back, and I was like, all right, let me like really sit with these characters for a minute and think about them in a totally different visual style. And then it came together. Then like I came up with a pitch to everybody was on board, and the rest is history. But it wasn't a hard sell for me at all. And I feel like super lucky that David was in my corner, the way he was to have me on board.
So, both as an appreciator of great storytelling and as an educator, I love how much you do with this book. I mean, as Marcus just said, I mean, it's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, but it's not just a retelling of Huckleberry Finn. I mean, you could have just told a story where you followed the plot points, but it was
yeah,
from Jim's perspective, and that's not what you did. You I mean, I was actually explaining to one of my students today, when we were talking about what we read, that like it's not that I won't, but I've gotten tired of reading privileged white guy books because I'm a privileged white guy. I know that perspective. Yeah, I relate to that perspective, but it's gotten boring to me. Not not because there's no good writing there, but because the world is so much more fascinating than just my perspective. And I had never realized how little I knew Jim before I started reading this book.
I
I
think
mean, and I
nobody knew Jim. Sorry, not to cut you off, but I don't
no,
think any of us
well,
did. Yeah.
but again, this is I totally agree with you, but
Yeah.
this is the difference between reading it from the privileged white kid status to reading it from not that. I thought I knew Jim. He was the nice guy that was helping out Huck. I knew him as well as any other nice guy in most stories, and it didn't like occur to me that this, when I was reading initially, when it started to occur to me that the book was problematic, was the first time I was reading it to my kids. I'm like, okay, I need to explain this to you. And I need to explain this to you. And we should probably explain this. And I can't believe I'm reading this to a 6-year-old. um, but so like I'd started to become aware, but Jim was two-dimensional to me in the way so many secondary characters in all sorts of young adult literature, and even though young adult literature didn't exist at the time, that's what Huckleberry Finn is. It's young adult literature. It's um and one of the hallmarks of a lot of young adult literature is that like your main character or maybe your main two characters are really fleshed out, and all of the adults are just adults, and they're either bad adults or good adults, and Jim was a good adult, you know. um so
Well, it's interesting because I think that, for me, and Marcus and I have talked about this before, as a kid growing up, there was no terms, no one was using words like representation or anything like
right.
that back when I was a kid.
Mhm.
Um, but I would read books and I would watch movies and see TV shows, and I was always sort of thinking about like, well, I wanted more, especially, whenever I saw black characters, not just black characters either, like um Asian characters as well too. I
Right.
mean, I was sort of a product of my generation. I was obsessed with Bruce Lee and kung fu movies, and so I would see, if I saw something with like I remember watching all the on TV all the time the show Bonanza, right?
Mhm.
And they had the cook that worked for them, and I was like, okay, this character is more interesting than all the characters on Bonanza, but he's also really like it's such a racist caricature, Um, and so early on, my imagination would be sparked by whatever, these all these different characters, and I would always think like, wouldn't it be cool if, right? Like, like that's what fan fiction becomes, right?
Right.
Like, you know, wouldn't it be cool if Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock were secretly lovers, right?
Right.
That's the thing. Um and so for me, there was always like, even sometimes they were just little wheels turning in my head, wanting to know the stories of these various different characters, and always, inevitably, almost always being really disappointed because either they were treated very one-dimensional, not fleshed out, they came, they went, and or worst case scenario, they were killed off, right? Like a lot of the movies I was watching as a kid, the whether science fiction movies or fantasy horror movies, you'd see a black character and you knew inevitably this person's gonna die. And
Right.
before they die, they're probably gonna like be made out to be like a clown or a buffoon, it's gonna be played for laughs. Um and so as I got older and as I knew I wanted to become a storyteller, I was like, well, you got to kind of undo some of that sort of stuff, and you can undo it through original work, but there's also something really fun about looking at, again, something like Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and going,
Absolutely.
there's like, this is like there's so much opportunity there, right?
Yeah.
And you know so here we are talking about this book,
Yeah. And
um
if I
Go
could
ahead,
say, oh sorry.
please.
I just want to say briefly, like, and this isn't a spoiler because, like I said, it's in the preview of the book, in the early pages. But in our book, one of the many great ideas that David came up with was for, Jim and Huck and all of the characters of the story to exist in the same world in our world, in the same world of Mark Twain, right? So the same way that, Mark Twain had real life influences for a lot of these characters, essentially, as Jim would say, that damn Samuel Clemens stole my story. And so, and what that's allowed us to do is like basically have like, old Jim and old Huck, like looking back at their life and like telling their story. And you know, there's funny stuff like the ways that they'll disagree over like little details
Right.
and everything. But
Right.
you know, when a Jim's descendants would say, the truth usually lies in the stuff that they both agreed upon that happened, you know. But like what that's allowed us to do is kind of take um a look, I would say a very fair look at the original novel and its
Absolutely.
creation, and not necessarily like you know eviscerated or anything,
No.
but to just like really get in there and have a thoughtful discussion, put it in historical context and literary context, and then also just you know tell this um really dope
Kick-ass
story
story.
about Jim's about Jim's real story, you know.
Um, yeah, I mean, this is why I have you on the podcast so often, Marcus. You just like said my segue better than I was going to be able to say it. Because that was
Oh,
exactly where I was gonna take this by making it real and particularly by having um was it the great granddaughter, Jim's great granddaughter is
I think it's even
essentially
a
I get
few more
confused every time.
generations.
She's
great
like
Yeah,
great
like the
right.
great, I believe.
it's like
Okay.
yeah.
Something like
Um Telling the story to her granddaughter. Um but also as a history professor and somebody who wrote the book, you explore not just the personal family life of a Missouri slave. You explore the Civil War. You explore the Underground Railroad. You explore how hard it is to research the history of these things. I don't know, have either of you read Wake, the history of women-led slave revolts?
oh yes, I have read that. I was like, why that sounds
No.
Yeah,
familiar.
there were parts of this that reminded me of that because that one it started as a history comic and became a graphic novel that was one part history and one part autobio of how hard it is to research this because so little of it was documented in a way that was easy to identify. You know, everything was documented in the way that made the white guy who got his ass kicked look better or downplayed this or upplayed that. Oh no, it wasn't one lady, it was 30 huge men. um
Yeah, it's
so
interesting. Oh, go on.
no, well, that's just where I was going. Is I really appreciated how much of the holes in our history teaching you, if not plug, at the very least, ask the questions or encourage the questions in the reader for them to go out and start looking at not just Huckleberry Finn differently, but huge swaths of the history that they've learned differently. Not necessarily in a I'm wiping the slate type manner, but more in an additive manner, more like I know this part, but there's more to this story. Does that make
Well, and
sense?
yeah, I mean the slate being wiped is how history's written most of the
Oh yeah.
time, and so
Hmm.
I you know, and not to get it twisted, this isn't a history book. It's
No.
not nonfiction. But it just seemed to me that there was this opportunity, and you know, one of the stories that influenced me, both the book and the film, is Little Big Man, which I think Thomas. I can't remember his last name, whoever wrote Little Big Man.
I have Google in front of me. We'll find
Um,
out.
but the film was directed by Arthur Penn and it starred um,
Dustin
Dustin,
Hoffman.
you know, and that was sort of the precursor to another well-known story, which is of course Forrest Gump. But I liked how both of those
Thomas Berger.
Burger, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, they both wove in history. I like Little Big Man more than I like Forrest Gump, and that story has a ton of problems, but that's beside the point.
Yeah.
Um, but but you seldom see black characters moving through history that way, right? And it's always fascinating to me because you know every February you see people posting their little Black History factoids, right? And it's like I didn't know that, you know, I didn't know that, you know, Muhammad Ali was friends with Stepin Fetchit, and that Stepin Fetchit was friends with Jack Johnson, and that's like that Stepin Fetchit was part of Muhammad Ali's training camp, but yeah, like you find out these things, and in some cases they sound almost unreal.
Mhm.
They Regina King directed the movie
Oh yeah, One Night
yeah,
in Miami.
One Night in Miami,
Yeah.
which is based on a true story of Sam Cooke, Malcolm X, Jim Brown, and Malcolm X, and it's like you'll see sometimes pictures, and it's like, well, wait a minute, what are these people doing hanging out?
Mm,
And you want to know that story, but we almost never get that story, right?
right.
Um, and so for me, again, with Jim and telling this story, it was an opportunity for me to also plug in little things that I find interesting. Again, most people think that the first black soldiers to fight in the Civil War were from Massachusetts, and they weren't. They were from Missouri, right? And there's all this sort of stuff. Most people think that the war started when the Confederate States seceded. Most people don't know about the border wars that were going on before in Missouri and Kansas. Most people, and when even today, when you read stuff about slavery in Missouri, everything always says, "Oh, it was way easier and more pleasant than in the South." And it's like, well, like compared to what? Like,
This is this. I'm going to give you one of whether it's slavery or other things. Something that I've told students for years is anytime you read something about something horrible and somebody is trying to describe it as less horrible than over there,
yeah,
it was probably as or more horrible than over there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like, again, there was an opportunity, and it was really early on. I realized that if I just tried to write, um, you know, plot point for plot point of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, for me as a writer, there was no challenge there. But then, and this may sound sadistic, but I was like, and there's not as much challenge for Marcus, right? And there were moments, man, where I'm
Marcus is
writing
sitting there
stuff.
going, thanks so
Yeah,
much.
No,
there,
I was up for it. I was ready for it.
there was,
I know you were up for it. I was sometimes on Zoom with you at late night as you were drawing.
but it's like, trying to figure out what did the slave market in St. Louis look like,
Yeah.
right? Because there's very little written about it. Where were the slaves held when they weren't being auctioned off? These are all the sort of things that you know, that I find interesting, and the information isn't out there that much. I mean, we talk about the history of enslaved Africans and their descendants, and how poorly recorded it is, and how difficult it can be to get the information. And the truth is, yeah, it can be difficult, but the other side of the truth is that, like, there are amazing, massive amounts of records, and you know where they all are?
Oh,
They're all with the insurance companies,
Hmm.
because
that's true.
the big business
Yep.
was slave insurance. And I say that, and most people go, What are you talking
No,
about?"
no, I feel like that was a point in Wake too.
Yeah.
That
And
she's
and
running
and
around and finally wound up going to the like biggest insurance company in New York and just hitting the mother load.
and that's something that I chose to leave out. It was too much.
Right.
But I was like, when I found out about slave insurance, much like other people, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And then, the Schomburg in New York, they have all these archives, and you look through them, and it's like, these records are pretty accurate. These are much more accurate than what they would call like the slave registers, which were through the U.S. Census Department, or what the individual owners would keep for their own records. But like, insurance companies want to know everything. They want to know everything now. Does your car have anti-lock brakes? They also want to know, yeah, does that black 20-something-year-old male have good teeth? Like, these are all the sort of things. So, yeah. Anyway, that's me going off. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I just yeah. So I mean, you clearly got into the research. What was the craziest rabbit hole you fell down?
Oh man,
Or was
I
it the
fall down
insurance
rabbit
right
holes
there?
all the time. That's give Marcus a chance to talk. What was the
All
craziest
right,
hole you went
Marcus, what
down?
was the craziest rabbit hole you went down?
I mean, all right. Well, first of all, it's interesting because when so I had a job change, my day job. I still have a day job, but I had
Right,
a job change in 2022. And that was specifically because, comics work was going pretty well for me. Not well enough where I could not have a day job, but well enough where I could stop being completely insane and have like a full-time job, and make graphic novels and just have a part-time job and do it. I say that to say that like my day job that I took on in 2022, it was working at a historic abolitionist site.
right,
Matter of fact, the home of two black abolitionists in Albany, New York. And so it's interesting because and I'm going to get your question, I promise. But the reason I bring
no,
this up is because, and you actually made me think of this before, the fact that um a lot of
Marcus, you know how I
times,
work.
yeah, no, but like a lot of times what black people understandably, and I've said it myself at certain times, will say like, oh man, not another slave movie, right? Or I'm, if I never see another slave movie again, it'll be too soon. What I realized, right, is as somebody who like just at work every day and working on books like Big Jim, like it's not that slavery is something that's just like, oh, we're done with, or there's nothing to look at there or learn from. I think what it is that stories were being kind of, recycled, right? And we were seeing it from a certain perspective many times, which I think we turned around, which we did the opposite of. But many times what would happen is the enslaved people would be more the object than the subject. You know what I mean? But
Right.
like and that's one of the things I was really, so long story short, I feel like we made the book that satisfies what I think a lot of people were missing with other stories. But as far as like craziest rabbit holes, because I'm thinking, because it's interesting because there would be times where I would research after work, but then even at work, I would just kind of like pick people's brains about, these different aspects of enslaved people's experiences. I would say, oh, yeah, the craziest rabbit hole. I guess just I mean, clothing, you could go like really deep, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't just giving everybody the same outfit. I put thought into like who would be wearing what 19th century clothing and who wouldn't be. And so like clothing, I got pretty deep. And one thing I learned on the Black Panther Party was it's one thing to do visual research, but sometimes just like written, you really need the written word, right, to kind of fill in the blanks. Because a photograph can only tell you so much. Obviously, 1800s, if you're talking pre-Civil War, there really wasn't much photography. And even when the Civil War rolled
Well,
around,
I mean, I
that
was
wasn't
reading
like,
Calvin and Hobbes today, and according
yeah,
to Calvin's father, it's because the world was in black and white. So, I mean, your color just means you're a crazy artist.
yeah, yeah. No, but like it's
I'm sorry, I had to. That was today's strip, and I
yeah.
loved it.
I gotta go. But I've been talking about
I'll
Calvin and
send it
Hobbes
to you.
recently. Yeah. But yeah, so I think just like I got pretty deep with clothing, and there's just so much stuff. I remember David and I both were trying to figure out how um wounds would be tended to when a person was whipped, because we had to portray it. And we found a way to do it. I found a way to do it visually without being inaccurate, but also not betraying the fact that I didn't get 100% get it an answer. You know what I mean?
It's
Ironically, reading Percival Everett's book, there was a description of some stuff, and I'm like, oh, I wish I knew that back then. But so I would say like I just would go down rabbit holes like that. And I don't know. I feel like fashion history is actually interesting. If you had said to me like in
I
in 10th grade, like, hey, are you are you ever going to go down a rabbit hole, researching like, fashion history? I was like, no, probably not. Not that it would have been anything wrong, but I just
I,
wouldn't have
I
predicted it.
I have a friend who has a master's in history, and like her specialty is period costumes. She's
Mhm.
made her like her life work is both researching fashion throughout history and then recreating it so people can really understand
Yeah.
what it is. Because I mean, it's one of those things that it's so easy to not know. It's so easy to look at it and think, oh, well, that looks familiar, so I think I know what it is. And then you find out that the fabrics were completely different. Or to not think about it at all because you're not forced to.
Yeah.
And you know, I'll say this too. There's certain rabbit holes that I tried my best to avoid, but was still like there's a scene, and this isn't really too much of a spoiler, but there's a scene where Jim is stuck working in a salt mine in
Yeah.
Illinois. And it's like I hit a point where I was like, I can't give it time. I can't give it the time to
Hmm.
figure out what salt mine operations were like day to
Right.
day. I was trying to find some visual references so that Marcus could have an idea. And it's not a very big sequence that takes place in the salt mines, but it was like, it was more than anything, it was simply because during the course of my research, I had discovered that um, even though Illinois was a free state,
There was the
it still
exception.
it still essentially practiced slavery, and what they would do is they would just these industries would go over to Missouri and just rent slaves, or in some cases steal them, which is
Right.
um, and I wanted that aspect in the story, and so in order for that to work, it was like, okay, we're gonna have to have a salt mine, and then it was just like, and then I realized, you know, the best thing that could happen to us is like some historian who knows everything about salt mines in Illinois in the 1900s or the 1800s is like, you guys got this wrong. And then they come out and then we can shine a light on them and
Right.
help educate people. But a lot of times you're kind of winging it. And
Right.
for myself, I'm not a historian. I'm a writer. I call myself an armchair historian, but I don't have a bunch of letters after my name that gives me any sort of like real level of expertise.
I
I,
mean, to be fair, some of the people with letters after their name aren't very bright.
well, no, they're not, and it's
Some
in a
of
lot.
them very much are. I don't want to say that like there's nobody with advanced degrees that like
Yeah,
has
but
earned it and you should listen to them and whatnot, but there are definitely some people with a lot of letters after their name and like
and so for me, the thing is, and I honestly can't remember who I was talking to about this. Um, but it was before I wrote the Black Panther Party, I wrote the Frederick Douglass, a graphic novel about the life of Frederick
yep,
Douglass, and I was
fantastic by the
talking.
way.
Thank you. And I was talking to somebody about like how I was having trouble figuring something out, and the pieces of the puzzle aren't there, and they said to me, sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith. You want to try to make the best educated guess you can about how this particular thing happened or how that particular thing happened. um and that's it. And then
Right.
somewhere along the line someone comes along, um and or something is discovered, an old document, an old text is
Hmm.
discovered, and we realize, oh, what we thought was wrong, right?
Yep.
And all these other books. And the key thing is to just go, okay, it was wrong. We don't, we don't get into fisticuffs over it, but we just adapt, adjust, and move on.
I
Yeah. And can I
mean,
add something
that
from
sounds very nice.
yeah, and just from the visual perspective, sorry, my call dropped, but I was thinking about this when the call dropped, is it's like the aspect of comics and cartooning that actually lends itself to this is the idea of like what happens in between the panels. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? Like you can really there is a way because I definitely employed that, and like
Yeah.
like with the salt mines,
Hmm.
Yes.
and other things where where there's just kind of like we want to portray, we want to give a clear idea of place and what's happening, but like we don't know all the minutia of like what everything looks like. So yeah, just that concept of what happens, of what you can imply like between the panels and what happens in the gutters. So it's interesting because I mean obviously the more experience that artists have in comics, usually you grow as a cartoonist, but I'd say like the challenges of telling these period stories where you oftentimes have kind of limited reference. It's actually in some ways it's helped my growth as a cartoonist because I've had to figure out like, all right, how do I clearly tell this story even if I have no idea about certain aspects, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, no, I think that that's honestly, like, this is where I'll, give you your flowers. That's part of what why working with you is always a treat because, I will go out of my way to try to find images and reference, but I also know that you're going to do it too, right? And I know that that if I can't find it and you can't find something, we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. And this is what we learned during the Black Panther Party. There was always these moments where it would be like, how do we show this? How do we make this work? There's or what did this person look like? There
mhm.
was Tarika Lewis, I think was her last name.
Yeah,
Like when we were trying to figure out what she looked like, and
yeah,
it was like it was almost like an episode of CSI, because it was like we had pictures of her, you know, fairly contemporary within the last like 15, 20 years, and then like we knew there were pictures of her, but we didn't know who she was. So we're sort of looking and like, oh,
yeah,
I think this is that person. It's like,
yeah,
um, and to be able to work with somebody who's willing to do that, or who maybe even enjoys like that level of sort of investigation, just makes it, makes what can at times be a challenging process that much more rewarding.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it is stuff that like I know now that is I figured out while working on Jim that I'm like, oh man, I wish I'd known this with Black Panther Party. I mean, obviously we're all happy, we're both happy
Yeah.
with Black Panther Party, but I'm it's the maybe it's the comic book version of what is it? Youth is wasted on the young. You know what I mean? It's just like it's like, oh man. I mean, not that
Isn't
I don't
that
even
actually that's a simplification of a Mark Twain quote.
yeah, it probably is. So it all
Mark
comes full circle.
Mark Twain, I always get the quote exactly wrong, but he essentially said that when you're young, you have the energy for fun and whatnot, but not the means. When you're old, you have the
Mm,
means, but not the physical ability.
yeah.
That's
um,
true. I feel that every day.
yeah. This is probably, and this is an art question, but I think it's going to wind up being for both of you. Um, this is one of the rare books that I feel like the art style, more than the writing, is what made it YA. I feel like you could have drawn it differently and made it a very adult book without changing much of the writing. Was that a conscious decision? Was that, I
You
mean,
want to
what
go
was the
first,
audience
or
that you were going for? I mean, I mean, I mean, as I was formulating this question, I picked up Kyle Baker's Nat Turner, which is very much Kyle
Hmm.
Baker, but like
Right.
a darker, harsher Kyle Baker.
Definitely.
And this is very much you, Marcus, but it's closer to cash and carry you than even um
Snow Days
Black Panther you.
or Black Panther. Yeah.
I mean, it feels like it's supposed to be accessible to a younger audience without glossing over the horror, just without throwing it in your face in your face. Does that make sense? I mean, you've got the scars, but not the blood. You've got the silhouette of the
Brains,
the
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 brains being blown up.
well, I was thinking of the lynching, but not
Right.
like
Yeah.
the
Yes.
full
Yes.
on
Yeah.
Right.
decaying
So
body. So,
yeah. So there's a yeah, all right. So there's a lot to talk about there. One thing I would say is I remember early on, I think between David, our agent Alex, and myself, like there was and the editors, there was a talk of like we want to like keep it real, right? But we also um there was like rules early on, you know what I mean? Like that we weren't gonna, it wasn't going to be gratuitous, even as we were, portraying the horrors of slavery and the violence and all of that. Um, but so it's one of those challenges, and David kind of like referred to before that I kind of enjoy like taking on like these creative challenges, and that was definitely the case here. I'd say for almost any book, like when I'm starting a project like this, like I really do like try to be like there's a part early on where I'm like, all right, like what is it going to look like? What's the general style language of it going to be? And we went through a few things. Um, and I guess where I landed here was just taking all of those things into consideration, taking the material we're dealing with, which, like you mentioned earlier, was um, for all of the content, a children's book, right? And this like kind of like grand adventure. Um, our book, I mean, it is that, but it's like also so much more. So
mhm.
I mean, for me, like that early phase of just like trying to nail down like what this style was. There was some. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this, but there were like some examples that like were given to me as like, oh, maybe like look at Royer or these people and like what they're doing, and I like tried to make some of that stuff work, but it wasn't. It wasn't me. It was really cool, but it like wasn't me, um and it wasn't quite landing for what it was. So to answer your question, I kind of just kept playing with it until it clicked into place. There was like some definite uh there was thought that went into it, but like it's usually for me, my creative process is a balance of, conscious thought and
But
finding a reason for something, but
right.
also just like feeling it out too and feel what feels
But
right.
heading into it, there was the idea that you wanted it to be more all ages accessible than it might have been if you'd gone photorealistic blood and
Well,
gore.
and I had no desire for that, right?
No,
Like
I didn't think, yeah, no, I that's
and
why I said it might be a both of you question.
I think that there's, you know, when we're talking about this particular medium, we're talking about a juxtaposition of text and image, and the text itself is part of the art. It lays on the page with the art.
Mhm.
It's part of the composition. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff that needs to be thought about, but it's not just the juxtaposition of text and image. It's what it's the juxtaposition of what the text is saying and what the image is saying within its style, right? And we went through this with the Black Panther Party, which was like, I before Marcus had come on board, and we were talking about, I was talking with the editorial team about some different artists, and it was a very short list, and Marcus was the most for lack of a better term, the most cartoony of the artists. And I said, okay, for one thing, because of the serious nature of this book, if we have something that looks a little bit younger, a little bit more kid friendly, it's going to help to, I don't want to say soften, but help make it more accessible, right? But then I also said, but if you look at this guy's work, and I sent some samples of his sequential stuff and some of the portrait stuff he was doing. I was like, there's a versatility here that a lot of artists don't have, right?
Right.
And so even before we made the formal offer to Marcus to do Big Jim, like this was running through my head, was like, okay, you know, my favorite comic book artists of all time are more along the lines of cartoonists.
Well, please name them.
It's I mean it's Will Eisner, it's Alex Toth, it's Gil Kane, it's Jack Davis, it's a lot of the folks that came out of EC.
Right.
But it's that, I happen to be a big fan of that style of art that again is often called cartoony, but or cartoonish, as if that's a bad thing, right? And it's not a bad thing, right?
I,
Because
I think Darwin Cook taught a generation that it wasn't a bad thing.
yes, Darwin Cook very much is, he is an artist, who stood on the shoulders of, again, Alex Toth
Toast and
and
yeah, absolutely.
Bernard Krigstein and
Right.
a lot of these folks who there was also a versatility in their execution,
Right.
but and there are artists who do that photorealistic stuff, and I love their work, but I don't like when I'm writing, I don't see
Right.
stuff that way. Like I will have a vague idea in my head of what a character might look like, and I think one of the reasons Marcus and I work so well together is, this is my feeling anyway, is that like Marcus draws the way I would draw if I could draw, if that
Right.
makes sense, right? So it's
Okay.
like, if I was a musician and I didn't really play bass that well, I lay down enough of a bass line to, then hand the bass to someone like Larry Graham or to, Bootsy Collins and go, okay, now you do it. Now you make it better than
Right.
the way I
Right.
first heard it. Um,
Right.
and so in that regard, Marcus is my Bootsy Collins, right? He's
Okay.
or
There
my
you go,
Mark
Marcus.
or you pick
It's a good
Well,
any.
thing to be.
that's gonna be a pull quote. I like that.
Yeah. I think that needs to go on the back of the next book you go do together. Just call him your Bootsy Collins,
Yeah.
or dedicate the next book to my Bootsy Collins, Marcus Kwame.
You say
Um,
that now, I'm gonna start calling him Bootsy Collins. We're like, yeah, Bootsy.
I might
Hey, I'll
too.
take
I
it.
I
I'll
talk to
take
him
it.
like once a month. I mean, we got the brothers Anderson, not related, but we might get rid of the brothers Anderson and have Ted Anderson and Bootsy.
I'll go with it, man. One other thing about art that I was thinking about, it's like as somebody who so when I sit down to paint, and I don't really, it's not like I love drawing more than painting or I love painting more than drawing. I love them both in different ways, and I swear it's like whichever one I'm focusing on more on a given year, I miss the other one. Like, so but that being said, like for me, the difference when people ask me what the difference is between my approach to painting and my approach to drawing or drawing comics, it's definitely when it comes to painting, it's like I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like it's like sculpting in two dimensions. It's like building something up. Whereas like drawing, I feel like I'm taking line, I'm taking shadow, and tricking the eye into seeing volume, you know what I mean, like on this flat surface. But it's like I don't know, it's like maybe more immediate, even though obviously drawing can be very time consuming. But like my point is that like for me, I do like doing realistic work if the work calls for it,
Right.
but there's like a joy in the cartooning and the fun stuff, and not even fun, but like just the movement, the exaggeration of cartooning, the way that like it's an early lesson, like when I teach about things, but like if you're drawing like say somebody like reaching for something and your forced perspective, you need to draw the hand like a little bit bigger than what it would be if you were looking at that exact same thing. And it's like stuff like that, or it's like Jim and Hook running away from the explosion. And the other thing is like I really do love animation. Like I'm fascinated by it, especially when I see like animation stills or even just like animation character designs and like how they think about conveying form, volume, movement, and all those things. And like I'm always trying to communicate movement in the way that like animators are when they have the advantage of like having multiple frames to communicate that movement. And to me, it's like when I go photorealistic, it's not as easy to convey
Right.
that. You know what I mean? Like stuff
Right.
can look really posed and so I had fun with that on this book. And
It shows. I mean, it
yeah, and
shows.
the Black Panther Party was I had a lot of fun with that. But because I was drawing, there was more of a pressure to for me, and it was probably more self-imposed than anybody else, but there was more of a pressure because I'm like, all right, a lot of these people are still walking the earth. You know what I mean? Like they're still out there. They may pick up this book one day. Somebody may say like, hey, did you see how this dude drew you or whatever? So there was a little bit of a pressure to kind of get things right and make people look like themselves. And in dealing with the time period that we're dealing with, there's a few people, no spoiler, without spoiling, where, you know, there are people that you've seen photos of, but for the most part, I just had the freedom to kind of come up with character designs and decide like who these people are going to be. So I got to play a lot as I was making this book was a lot of work, but I got to play
So
while I was drawing
something
it.
something that went through my mind while David was talking about how it softens it just a little bit. I saw an interview with Ibram X. Kendi right after Joel Christian Gill had adapted Stamped from the Beginning. And he was asked, why are you making this into a graphic novel? And he talked about um, the fact that the medium, as well as bringing it to more people and making it more accessible, allowed for an introduction of humor without taking away the gravity. I think his exact words were along the lines of, "This is really heavy stuff. I mean, like really heavy stuff, and you want to break it up with a laugh here and there, but in prose, there's no good way to do that."
Yeah, no,
But
it's difficult.
when you're doing a comic, you can have the heaviness and you can have the funny. Um, and while yes, this has the funny too, I think actually a lot of the flash forwards to the storytelling will provide that comic relief. What I actually wanted to focus on more is, as well as making it more accessible to a younger reader, I feel like the way you handled it, where both through the language and through the image, you show the brutality enough, but not to the extent that one can be numbed by it. It actually means that you sit with it more. You think about it more. You can't go, okay, I need to distance myself from the horror. As you're reading it, you go, oh God, that's horrible. And oh God, that's horrible. And how can he be that loving and empathetic when that horror is going on? I mean, it really, because that's the other thing that I really really love about this book, is that you get to see how hard so much has been for Jim, and it doesn't take away his compassion.
Yeah, no, that's the thing with and Marcus, man, nailed it so many
Yeah.
times and so many little just the when you really study the art and the expressions, there's a minimal amount of lines. It's an Alex Toth minimalism
Mhm.
almost, right? But for me, what was really crucial is that for the most part, when we're looking at mass media of that depicts, people who are enslaved, there's not a lot of dimension there. There's not as much
No.
humanity as there needs to be. There really isn't. And so to me, that was the thing, was like, we're never going to deprive Jim of any of his humanity. And no matter what he goes through, it's like he's like the people that he loves, and he
Right.
never gives up on them. And that was the thing I think for me, with Mark Twain's original book was like one of the things that was missing was never there was for me, I never understood Jim's loyalty to Huck, right?
Right.
Uh it could carry a narrative so far, but there comes a point where it's like, yo, wait, why are you going downriver?
Well,
Right?
yeah, I mean,
We
Marcus
didn't need
brought
to-
this
yeah,
brought Percival Everett's book up earlier, and I'm not going to let us go spoiler here, but it is interesting that that seems to be a question that both of you had, and you
yeah,
both had to answer the question, why is Jim loyal to Huck?
yeah.
What is it that makes Jim loyal to Huck? Um,
And once you ask that question, the
right.
book starts to change.
Yeah,
Mm.
And so, again, I'm not poo-pooing what Twain wrote. I'm not poo-pooing the book, and I'm not poo-pooing him as a man. But I do think that of the time, I don't think I think a lot of and let's never forget the fact that he came from a family of
hmm
slave owners.
right,
Um, I don't necessarily know if he fully saw the humanity
right.
of both those who were enslaved and those who were set free. Maybe he did, I don't
Right.
know, but it's
He
not
definitely had a limited perspective.
that's it
I mean
definitely
that's something that I found myself thinking about a lot because for a long time he's been held up. I mean, this work has been held up as almost an abolitionist book,
yeah,
and like in the context of other white literature at the time, sure, but you gotta throw that context in.
yeah.
Um,
And I mean, Uncle Tom's Cabin is much more of an abolitionist manual
right,
than um than Huckleberry Finn, and that's another book that people don't understand. I mean, a lot
Mm.
of people don't understand Huckleberry Finn because more people have seen any one of the numerous movies
right,
that have been the adaptations that have been than have actually read the book, right?
right.
And the same thing with Uncle Tom's Cabin. There's been so many movies, none of them are actually faithful to the book. And the book for its time was as revolutionary as anything is ever going to be
Right,
in its depiction of the enslaved.
right. Um, but and but that's still, I mean, that right there is why it's always worth revisiting
Yeah,
history. It's always worth looking at things from another perspective. Um, because I mean, it's like the Rashomon effect.
yeah,
You know, four people watch something, and actually, that's another thing that I love that you do. There are things that Huck and Jim agree upon while they're telling the story, and there are things that they bicker about. No, it was dynamite. There wasn't dynamite yet. Well, then it was gunpowder.
Right.
Where did you
And I
get gunpowder?
and and I love that because it kind of it even leans into like I don't know, even when they're old, like the trickster side of Hook is there.
Yeah,
And even if it's just maybe he's misremembering, maybe he's telling it in the way that makes him look like the most
some of
awesome.
both.
But yeah, but it's like, I love being able to kind of like play with portraying them throughout these different generations in this time. I want to say something really quick. I just don't want to forget it. Because I think before when we were speaking about like Jim holding on to his humanity even through all these horrors, it's like I relate to that. I feel like that's a sense. Obviously, we live in a different time, and I'm not, I would say it would be disrespectful to my ancestors to say that what I've dealt with in my time on this earth has been as bad as what they dealt with. But that being said, like we are living, America is forever marked by, the crimes that were committed and what's happened. That being said, like, so I mean, I just thought about that, like the way that, even I, as a father, as a man, I move through the world, um, and there's ways in which, like, you could become cold, but that's not me. And I think about like, holding on to that, and you know what I mean. And in addition, like, there's these really these moments that David wrote, because there's a lot of moments as I was reading the script and doing layouts where I was like, oh man, like like I get to draw this. And one of and some of the real poignant stuff when it comes to like the humanity in the face of horrors, right, is when like there's these exchanges, again, without spoiling too much, but I think we've already spoken about like the Civil War element and the fact that Jim and Huck interact in the Civil War. And, there's this part where Jim is just talking about how there is no joy in killing, even when you're killing absolutely horrible people, and like the way he describes it, um, you see the brutality and you see them kind of like intercut, between the words and what's being portrayed, and then also Jim speaking about it, as an old man. And then and Huck, like he just really um you see it weigh on him too. And I think that's the difference between like when David spoke about how like maybe his earlier story had been maybe more in the vein of blaxploitation versus where we landed, because it's like, yeah, like Jim and Huck had to do some like real shit, but they you know they're human beings, and there's a toll to this. And like we live in a society where it's like all our action heroes are you know like James Bond is a sociopath. It's like
Yeah, a
he's a dude
sociopath
that's like,
who
yeah.
Well,
he's also
actually, I
the
think it's
deadliest STD of all time because at least
Yeah,
one woman per movie he has sex with dies.
right, yeah, pretty
Always.
much, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
no, that's more than once I've talked about with people in the podcast, with students, with just friends. Um, I'm the first generation American, Marcus and I think, first generation of Americans that most of us didn't wind up going to war. There were wars going on, but most of us didn't either go or know somebody. Otherwise you go Vietnam, Korea, World War II, World War One,
Yeah.
Spanish American War, Civil War, 18, every generation just had massive amounts of trauma that we're only really starting to recognize now. Um, I mean, I spent a decade working in senior care, and I can tell you that greatest generation was haunted,
Yeah.
haunted. So I mean that, like I led off with, this book did so much more than I had I had high expectations for this book, guys, and it did so much more than I could have expected, including, taking into account way back in Civil War era. Yes, they're horrible people. Yes, they were going to kill you if you didn't kill them. Yes, it fucking sucks to kill somebody. I assume. I've never
Yeah.
done it.
Now, I this is I'm sure some of this will come back to haunt me at some point. But I've said this pretty openly. When we really started working on this in earnest and it really started coming together, I felt like not only did I have an opportunity, but I had an obligation as a writer. I mentioned earlier, I said a legacy book, right? I felt like, well, if we're doing this, we need to do beyond the best book that we can do. We need to do a book better than anyone's expecting
Yeah,
from us. And it's not just because we won an Eisner, it's because
right.
that I honestly believe deep down inside we both have the talent to do something collectively, right? Something that I couldn't do with just words, something that Marcus wouldn't necessarily be able to do with another writer who was going to take at times the path of least resistance, right? And I'm old enough that I remember when the term graphic novel was first really seriously started being introduced into the conversation, the pop culture conversation, late 70s, early 80s. And so I've watched like people's top 10 greatest graphic novels of all time list never change. and um, I was like, let's try to be additive to that list. Let's
Yeah.
try to let's try to take this medium to a place that most people don't take seriously or don't think it's capable of. Because even, I teach, um, I've been teaching writing for comics in Portland State University's comic studies program, and more than half of my students come into the class and they're like, "Oh, well, I don't really read comics. But I really like the Marvel movies, right?" And it's like, then what are you doing here? Right? Like, and what's your goal for this medium
Right.
that I love so much, right?
Right.
My shelves are filled with, the EC archives, and it's filled, the shelf right in front of me, right above my eye line is my Will Eisner shelf, right? And this is what I wanted to do. And it wasn't so much arrogance as it was this feeling of like, let me do my best to give something to this medium that gave me everything, right? Like what I know as a storyteller, I learned more of it from comics than I did from film, because I grew up at a time when there was no internet, there's almost no cable, there was no home video. You just read the same comics over and over and over,
Yes. Yeah,
and
yeah,
and
yeah.
that was how I learned how to tell stories, right? And while some of that stuff hasn't aged that well, and some of it's dated, I was buying the Spirit magazine that Warren was republishing all of Will Eisner stuff. I'm like a kid in
Kitchen
1976
sink.
buying. Oh, it's Kitchen Sink.
Kitchen
Yes,
sink.
yes, you're right.
Dennis
Sorry.
is a friend of mine. I can't let
Yes.
that one pass.
The reason I said Warren was because Warren was doing a lot of crazy stuff in the 70s,
They
and they
were.
were always there. The ads were always going back and forth, but I still
Right.
have some of those issues of the Spirit.
I do
Um,
too.
and
I
and
mean, let me rephrase. I have gotten some of those issues of the spirit. I'm not quite that old.
you're not as old as
No.
this guy right here.
I
Um,
mean, I wouldn't have called you that old. You did it yourself.
well, but that's the thing. It's like, I just, you the with all of the access that there is to story right now through the internet, most of us are walking around with a little computer in our pockets. Like, you would think that people would be getting better at what they do,
Yeah.
but most of them are just getting lazier,
Yeah.
and I tell people all the time, if you want to see the most new, original, and innovative stuff in comics, go back 60, 70 years and look at what was being done.
Yeah. Yeah.
We could have a conversation because I there was lots of great stuff being done 60, 70 years ago, and particularly the EC stuff. I think it took 30 years for some of that to come back. Eisner was way ahead of his time,
Yeah.
but I think we're in the platinum age of comics. I think there are more good comics now than there have ever been. I think the bar to get published, I mean, as much as it's easier to publish because you can just throw it up on the internet, I think bad comics are better than they've ever been. Does that make sense? Like the one that you can't believe it got published is so much better than the one that you can't believe got published 30 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
Um and when you were talking about, people's lists staying static, all that could go through my head is if you still have Watchmen in your top five, A, you better have an Eisner in front of it, and B, what have you been reading for the last 40 years?
Well, I've been telling people, oh, Marcus, you have something?
Oh, no, no, no. It's because what I was gonna say is going in a different direction. So no, go for it.
Oh, no, what I was just going to say is I've been telling people, whatever is on your top 10 list of your favorite graphic novels of all time, one of them's got to come off, because Big Jim's going to replace it.
Oh, I can tell you right now, mine's already been reordered.
Yeah, that's the and it's
Yours,
and as
it's
arrogant
already
as
top
that
five.
sounds,
It's
is
already top five.
there you go. You will be the
I
first.
don't think it's taken out Love and Rockets.
Okay.
No,
So
and I
so
wouldn't,
that
nor
top
should it.
spot is
Yeah, no,
hard.
that I wouldn't want it to.
Yeah, that
It's
top spot is hard.
yeah.
I think Saga still has number two, but you might be fighting with my favorite thing is monsters for number three.
Okay. And
That's
all of these, and see, here's the thing. Now, like my favorite thing is monsters is like because when we talk about comics and we talk about graphic novels, unfortunately, most people have a very limited scope
Oh,
of
I know.
understanding of what it is and what the medium's
Now
capable.
you know what my show is about, David.
Yeah, I know. And so I find it refreshing, when you know, yeah, Love and Rockets deserves to stay on a list, stay on anyone's list, right?
Well,
But what
particularly as they keep going.
yeah, but there's also we're at a time now where, again, what people forget, we'll throw out Watchmen as an example, right? Watchmen's not a graphic novel.
No, it
Watchmen
was
was a
single
12
issues.
issue comic
Right.
book
12
series
issue series.
Right.
Yeah.
that was
Right.
reprinted, and even Love and Rockets,
It
that's what it
is.
is, right?
Mhm.
That's how we're reading them in our Love and Rockets book club as we've been going issue by issue. We just
And
finished our
and
first 50.
but when you look at, say, something like the works of Paco Roca, who's one of my favorites,
Oh,
Mhm.
it's like
I
those are
love
graphic
Paco
novels.
Roca.
Right.
Those aren't serialized,
Nope.
individual floppies. Days of Sand is another one. Ducks is
Yeah.
another one.
Yep.
We're talking about, like, we are in an
I got to see Kate Beaton last weekend. I was out at CXC, which by the way, you guys should start lobbying to be at CXC next year because this book belongs there.
it's I would go again, even though it's in Columbus. I'd go again.
Well, I mean,
You never get tired of looking at that Schwarzenegger stat.
this year they this
There's
year they
Marcus, I don't know if
scheduled
you know
it.
this. There's a
No.
a massive statue of Arnold Schwarzenegger in downtown Columbus, Ohio, because that's where
Flexing.
the the Mr. Universe bodybuilders.
Right.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so you're walking down the street in Columbus, Ohio, and you're like,
Yeah.
why is there a
Arnold?
statue of Schwarzenegger here? Um, but they also have the Billy Ireland Museum,
Yes.
Library Museum, which is the most
But Billy
amazing.
Ireland
Well,
is I told Marcus that I offered to pay for Marcus to come this year, but he said he had to work.
I'm always working. It's.
Um, but yeah, no, I don't have enough superlatives for this book. Like I said, we're gonna have to revisit it when we can dive into stuff that
The spoilery stuff.
yeah,
That's going to
yeah.
be in 8 days. The book comes out in what, 6 days, 7 days, and in eight
Right.
days from now, people are going to be like, "What
Well, I
happened?
know,
Not
but
going to hold
I
it
don't want
until
to get
secret."
you guys. I
Yeah,
mean, if
yeah.
you guys want to come back in 8 days, I'll have you back in 8 days. But B, I figured there's a difference between the internet spoiling and the author spoiling.
Yeah,
True, true.
very true, very,
Yeah.
very true.
Um, but since I know I'm trying to actually be kind to my friend Marcus and not keep him past the hour and a half that he was hoping to keep us to, I'm
No,
gonna
we're actually good. We're good. But go for
we're
it.
at an hour 20 right now, which is
Yeah.
why I'm taking us into my favorite final question. You
Okay.
know I have a favorite final question. Tell me something you love, preferably a comic, um, that not enough other people have experienced, and you need them to, so you can talk to them about it.
Oh man, well, it's going to be the two that have had a really big, tremendous impact on me in the last several years. One is The Art and Life of Charlie Chan Hok Chai by
Oh,
Sunny
so
View,
good. So
which
good.
is I would argue that's probably my number one graphic novel of all. Like, it's second only to Kyle Baker's Why I Hate Saturn. Um,
That's
Oh yeah.
though technically, I mean, if we're going to get into that whole single issue
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
Why I Hate Saturn was 3 issues
yeah,
and
yeah.
then collected into a graphic novel.
But so the Art and Life of Charlie Chan Hok Chai, and then I
Pantheon just in general has done so much good work.
yeah, and then there's this book Days of Sand, which was oh, she's French. Amy,
Amy Jean, right? Is
yeah, Amy
it
Jean,
or
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
something like that. Those are the two books that I can't stop looking at and thinking about. And then again, anything by Paco Roca.
Yeah.
These are the things that I it's there's no superhero stuff in my list right now. There's nothing that really um
I'm
gets me
telling
there.
Bendis.
Oh, him and I talk about this all the
I know.
time,
I
and
know.
um I just picked up a book. I just started reading it. It's all about the relationship between C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien.
Okay.
And that's pretty fascinating so far. But
Is
again,
that
it's a long list. It's a long list of stuff that when I'm talking to people, and the frustrating thing is when I'm talking to artists and I'm like, yeah, what I want to do is sort of like this, and there's this blank stare, and they're like, I want to do something like Spawn, and I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, later for you. So
which one are you reading about Tolkien and Lewis?
I don't even think it's come out yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Because there have been a few. I read one years
no,
ago.
this one's brand new, and
Okay.
it's a graphic novel, but there's a
Oh, fantastic.
lot of prose sections in it too. So,
Okay.
um,
Actually, I grew up in Wheaton, Illinois, and I won't say much for Wheaton, Illinois, and I'll say even less for Wheaton College, except that they have one room that's kind of part of their library that's like the Lewis Tolkien room, and it
okay,
includes the actual wardrobe and some of Tolkien's handwritten maps and or hand drawn maps and some of the letters that they wrote back and forth to each other. Now, Wheaton College also has the Billy Graham Center, so like avoid that side of campus, but go check
okay.
out the wardrobe.
Billy Graham, the evangelist, not Billy Graham, the comic book artist.
Right, right.
Yes.
Not the comic books. Yeah.
I once went to a well, let me rephrase. I was once subjected to a trip to an exhibit that talked about how Cortez had brought Christianity to the savage Aztecs and had pictures of him burning them alive, but that was apparently okay if they didn't convert.
Hmm.
I ain't got nothing to say to that.
Yeah.
I don't really either.
So, Marcus,
Yeah, what's yours?
what are yours?
So it's interesting because definitely I had a feeling that you were going to say one of mine, David, which you by all rights should have because you're the one who recommended it to me was Days of Sand. I read that and then I I reread it immediately like after I read it the
Yeah,
first time.
That's always the
Um
sign of a great book.
yeah, yeah. And I really it's fascinating too. Like I love what she did just from a writing and visual perspective and just yeah it's fascinating. So since I have to pick something that is not that, I'm literally looking at my book pile right now. um hmm. Was the original question
Oh,
just something that I think people should know more about that's one of my favorite, or is it something that informed
no, it's something that you love that you wish you had more people to talk about. So they need to read
oh
more.
which I had more people to talk
Oh,
about?
she did Blossoms in Autumn. I know that book.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say because I mean definitely like Kyle Baker is up there, but it's not like nobody's read Kyle Baker.
It doesn't have
But
to, I mean,
I'm still
this
going to
is
say
where
that.
I will say that the last time I talked to Nate Powell, he told
Mm,
me Jonathan Hickman's X-Men, which particularly if you're Nate Powell and you hadn't been in a comic shop for 20 years because you'd been doing non-Wednesday Warrior type stuff, is a legitimate answer.
makes sense. Yeah.
Doesn't have to be obscure. It has to be
Yeah. Well, then I would
something that,
say like I no lie go back to why I hate Saturn at least once a year
yeah,
and Cowboy Wally as well too.
yeah.
It's it always cracks me up and
I
um
love everything Kyle does,
yeah.
and have email. we've come this close to having him multiple times, and like we'll get to scheduling and he'll vanish for 6 months.
Yep, that's look, I just sent him a message a couple days ago. I was like, I'm gonna be in New York City. Please, 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 please. Um, every interaction we have is when I randomly run into him at a convention. I'm trying to like I just would like to sit and talk to him at some
Yeah.
point, you know.
Well,
So
if you happen to run into him in New York, tell him that 22 panels guy would still love to talk to him. Because we've had great emails,
yeah,
but we've never managed to make like
make it
the
work. Yeah.
actual conversation happen.
See,
Which I
I
mean,
want
it
to have
seems like
that
he's
type
one
of
of those guys
impact.
that like falls into work.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
want to have
he's
that
like,
type of impact where I can be that elusive and it's just kind of like, you know,
just don't do it to me, Marcus. I like talking
nah,
to you too
nah,
much.
nah,
Be that
you're
elusive
good.
with other people, but show up for
Right.
the Milestone Book Club every month.
Sure. You got it.
And for birthday lunches when I happen to be in Albany area. I told David that story off air. I'll tell it on the air just because for I feel blessed because I kind of got to go along this journey with you guys, or at least with Marcus. Marcus told me about this book the day we met in person for the first time on my birthday, and I think my 42nd birthday. And he bought me lunch, told me what he was working on. I went, "Holy shit, that sounds amazing!" And he's like, "I know." And then it got announced on my birthday this year, so exactly 2 years later, and it is the most reposted 22 panels post ever. I forget what we topped out at, but I remember I kept updating Marcus because I'm like, everybody loves this book. And I know that they're not even looking to the post because I talked about how you told me about it on my birthday and now it was being announced on my birthday. And none of the comments said happy birthday. They all talked about how amazing the book looked.
Uh,
So nobody read anything. They just looked at the cover and went, fucking A, I want that book. And I can't believe we're a week away. I'm so excited. I'm so happy for you guys. I predict this time next year it's already going to be banned in a dozen libraries and on 2 dozen middle school syllabuses. Because frankly, I mean, if I'm a special ed para, so I do more working around the stuff. I don't work the curriculum. I don't have to choose the books. But if I was teaching Huck Finn and I saw this book, I would be teaching both of them immediately. You know, um, it's additive and explanatory in a way that would absolutely deepen the conversation. And if I wasn't teaching Huck Finn, I was just teaching great books. This would be on my list immediately because, as with any great work of art, it inspires as many questions as it answers. And I thank you so much for that. I thank you for the fact that it not only is an amazing read, but it gives me 17,000 other directions that I want to take my reading and my exploration of the world. Um, and to me, anyway, a piece of literature is really special when it does that. So thank you so much. Um, this has been 22 panels. David Walker and Marcus Kwame Anderson were my guests. Big Jim and the White Boy is in stores on what stage? It is the 7th, so it's coming out Wednesday or Tuesday next week,
October 15th.
October
yeah, Tuesday
15th.
on my
So
birthday.
next Tuesday. That's right. It's coming out for Marcus's birthday. So
Yeah.
everybody go buy
We're
a
gonna be we're
copy.
gonna be having
So
a party. We're having a
yeah.
party at Saratoga
Yes.
Springs.
Yep.
And for that matter, if you happen to be out in Hartford, Connecticut on the 24th, the two of them will be talking with who's your moderator?
Oh, not Joel
Viv,
Christian Gilsuni. No, I don't think.
Vivian
Yeah.
Nabeta? Nabeta?
That sounds right. Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right. I'm looking at it. A playwright and two-time Tony Award winning Regional Theater at the Hartford Stage, um, at the Mark Twain House and Museum. That's an event that if it was on a Saturday, I would drive through the night. But the idea of driving from Chicago to Hartford and back in time to teach on
That's a
Friday
great point.
morning, I don't think I can. I don't think I can quite pull out. I don't think it's physically possible. I don't think I'd leave school
Yeah.
at 3:30 and get there in time.
We want you to be
Um,
safe and we want you to have your
Yeah.
job.
and I took my days off for CXC. So, I didn't know. If I'd known, I would have had to debate. But thank you so, so much. And we will see you all after the next page.
Hey guys, this is Tyler from 22 Panels. I'm here to tell you all about our Patreon. If you enjoy this show, please consider donating to our Patreon to keep this show going. We have many different tiers, all different levels to help you decide what's right for you. Okay, so get on out there to patreon.com/22 Panels Podcast.